An American veteran's journey to find his Vietnamese son after 40 years. The midday sun poured over the tangled maze of Ho Chi Minh City's alleyways, painting the cracked pavement in warm gold. A tall, slender American man moved slowly through one of those narrow paths, each step measured, cautious. On his head was a straw hat shielding him from the tropical heat. In his hands, he clutched a weathered photo album, pages soft from time, edges fraying with every turn. This was not a vacation. This was a pilgrimage. A journey back to a place where love had once bloomed amidst chaos. And somewhere, perhaps nearby, perhaps long gone, was the answer to a question that had haunted him for over 40 years. What happened to my son? Gary Quinn, now in his 70s, had traveled thousands of miles from Taiwan, where he served as a missionary. Decades earlier, he had been a soldier in Vietnam. And like so many others during that war, he had fallen in love. Her name was Brandy, a young Vietnamese woman with a graceful figure and gentle eyes. In 1973, just as their child was growing in her belly, Jerry was pulled away by the tides of war. He had to leave. "I remember we lived in house number 40, Jerry whispered to his companion, Hung Phan, as they reached a small street. Hung, a dedicated Vietnamese interpreter and the man behind more than 20 years of reunions between American veterans and their Amerasian children, looked around. But there was no house 40, no sign. Just another mystery washed away by time. There were many like Jerry, American fathers returning in their twilight years, spurred by guilt, longing, or redemption. During the war, an estimated 100,000 children were born from relationships between U.S. soldiers and Vietnamese women. Some of those fathers never knew. Others knew, but chose to forget. Brian Hjort, a Danish humanitarian who co-founded Fathers Founded, saw it firsthand. "I remember meeting Amerasian children in the 1980s, he said. They were begging in the streets, looking for food, for family, for a place to belong. Some of those children clutched photographs, remembered American names. Hjort used military records to track down the fathers. But not all responded with open hearts. They'd scream at me over the phone," he recalled. "Don't call me again, that's not my kid." But Jerry Quinn was different. He believed God had placed him in Asia for a reason, to make amends. "I came to do what's right," he said quietly. "To be the father I wasn't able to be." A mother's picture, a stranger's hands, and a thread of hope. Their search continued, one alley at a time, one door at a time. In Jerry's hands were the 3 fading photos Brandy had mailed to him decades ago. The first was a portrait. Brandy, young and radiant, her hair falling softly across her shoulders. The second, more precious, Brandy holding a baby boy. The third, Brandy standing beside a woman in a white coat. That final image would become the lifeline. By the 3rd day in Ho Chi Minh City, Jerry's hope was beginning to crack. "I thought I'd feel closer," he admitted to Hung, "but she could be anywhere. He could be anywhere." They stopped by a noodle shop near where Jerry once lived with Brandy. He showed the photos to the elderly shopkeeper, her eyes crinkling as she studied them. And then, she stopped. "I know this woman," she said, tapping the photo of the woman in the white coat. "She was a midwife. She lived here for years, moved to the U.S., her daughter still visits. In fact, she was here yesterday." Jerry's heart jumped. Could this be the first real link? The next day, the shopkeeper made good on her promise. She contacted the midwife's daughter, Kim. She arrived at the noodle shop just as the lunch rush died down, a middle-aged Vietnamese woman with elegant posture and a calm gaze. She sat beside Jerry, opened the album, and gasped. "I remember her," Kim said, her finger trembling over Brandy's image. "We were close. I helped deliver her baby." Tears welled in Jerry's eyes. "Do you remember the child's name?" he asked. Kim shook her head gently. "No, so many records were lost, destroyed." But she remembered one thing, Brandy's surname, Bui, a thread, however thin. And then Jerry did something quietly profound. "May I hold your hands?" he asked Kim. She extended them. "These hands once held my son. he whispered, voice breaking. Maybe I'll never get to hold him, but I want to feel that moment, just once. The noodle shop fell silent. Diners stopped mid-bite. They watched as an old American man, weeping softly, held the hands of a stranger who had been there at the very beginning of a life he had never known. Reunion after 40 years. With no more leads in Vietnam, Jerry turned to the only remaining option, hope, amplified by the internet. He scanned the photographs, wrote a heartfelt post, and uploaded them to his Facebook page. "Searching for my son," the caption read. "Born in Vietnam, early 1973. Mother's surname, Bui. Please help me find him." Thousands of miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a man named Gary Bui stumbled upon the post. The images stopped him cold. He was 40 years old. The boy in the photo, cradled in Brandy's arms, was him. Gary had known fragments of his story. His mother had fled with him in fear as Saigon fell. She handed him to friends who took him out of the city, into the forests. "We lived in clay huts," Gary later told Jerry. "Sometimes there was no food. At 4 years old, he was placed in an orphanage. At 8, he was airlifted to New York as part of the Amerasian resettlement program. A kind family adopted him, but the questions never went away. He, too, had kept those same 3 photographs. When Jerry heard from Gary, he booked a ticket immediately. The flight to New Mexico felt endless, and as the taxi neared Gary's home, doubt crept in. Would he accept me? Would he let me in? Could he forgive me? The car stopped in front of a modest suburban home. Outside stood Gary's entire family, his wife, his children. Jerry stepped out of the car and froze. There, standing in front of him, was the man who had once been the baby in his arms. "One more feature," Jerry said, voice cracking, "and you'd be my mirror image." They embraced, tightly, desperately, father and son, lost and found. Behind them, 2 small children watched silently. Gary's children, Jerry's grandchildren. Gary took a breath. "I was called names growing up," he said. "They said my mother was a prostitute. I didn't even know if my father was alive." Jerry wept openly. "I thought you were with your mother," he whispered. "I never knew, never dreamed you were an orphan. There's so much I want to learn about you." For over 40 years, Jerry Quinn carried a weight that never eased. Guilt, regret, unfinished love. And yet, despite war, silence, and oceans of distance, he never stopped believing in the power of reunion. And for Gary, who had lived a life defined by questions, the answers finally came, not from a file or a story, but from the arms of the man he thought he'd never meet. In the end, a photo album led the way, but it was hope and love that made the reunion real.